this is actually a very sad story, one that reflects the state of civil aviation in the country. I'm just trying to open up this document from Indigo, which has come in just a little while back. It's a statement, in fact, a detailed one from the CEO of the airline, who says that we will need to bid adieu to 10% of our workforce. This pandemic has forced us to reevaluate our best laid plans. So essentially, what we are looking at in terms of what this is all about, 3,000 Indigo employees will be retrenched. Cost savings clearly not enough to offset a decline in revenues. Indigo employs 30,000 people, 10% to lose their jobs. Indigo is India's largest airline. Retrenched employees will get at least 3 months gross salary, including severance payment and a notice pay. And in terms of a few other statements that the airline has made, the CEO of Indigo, Ronojoy Datta, says, from where things stand currently, it is impossible for our company to fly through this economic storm without making some sacrifices. It's the first time in the history of Indigo that we have undertaken such a painful measure. So this is a very sad reflection of this complete meltdown in India's aviation sector, which has taken one of the hardest hits of any sector in the Indian economy. This is after all airlines in the country had to be grounded because of the impact of COVID-19. There were no flights at all. There were no flights either inside India or outside India. This continued for several months. Then finally, when the government did reintroduce, it was primarily being done with the intention of bringing back people who were stuck abroad as part of the Vande Bharat mission. Very few civil airlines initially were part of that process. It was Air India which was doing it, and it was Air India by and large which was even transporting them to their cities. In the last several weeks, that's changed somewhat. Domestic travel has opened up. We've seen the first flights resuming. There was a huge sense of optimism among the airlines. But the fact of the matter is that the scale of civil aviation in the country is not what it was. The number of flights being mounted, not what it was. All of these airlines in our country, whether it is Indigo or SpiceJet or Go or Vistara or AirAsia, or for that matter Air India, have invested very heavily in the acquisition of new aircraft at a time when India was one of the fastest growing civil aviation markets in the world. And therefore, they find themselves in a situation, and add to that the cutthroat nature of the business in India, a situation which is just untenable. So all of these airlines have had their staff members take huge salary cuts. A lot of their aircraft remain grounded even now because, as I've been mentioning, they are not operating anywhere close to capacity. I'm not sure right now on what the occupancy of seats on flights would actually be, the number of passengers on each flight. But this is the bottom line as far as India's airlines are concerned. Because of the nature of competition, if each flight doesn't have a very high percentage of its seats occupied, perhaps even more than 80, 85%, 90%, then that flight essentially becomes unprofitable. Add to that, there are a host of surplus charges, airport charges, landing charges, parking charges, and of course the biggest single problem, unpredictable aviation turbine fuel costs in the country, which traditionally have been some of the highest in the world. Now again, add in the competition over there, and all of these airlines were flying very much on the edge in terms of their financial reserves, in terms of their cash reserves. Indigo was still profitable. The other airlines weren't profitable in that same sense. In fact, most of them were just about struggling to ensure that they carried on. But Indigo did have cash reserves, but it was also the largest, with 30,000 employees, with more than 200 odd aircraft, one of the youngest fleets in the world, new aircraft coming in almost every week. It had an ambition to be not just India's largest, which it already was, but among the largest in the world eventually, because they were really opening up their international operations as well. They were having to weather a number of concerns about the safety of some of the engines on their A320 and A321neo aircraft, but they appear to get that engine replacement plan going as well. That would have been finished by now, and that concern would perhaps have been in the past, but then COVID came along, the airline was completely grounded. Now all of the employees who are out of a job now, 3,000 of the total strength of 30,000 will be getting at least 3 months of their gross salaries. And depending on your seniority, how long these individuals. And I'm not just talking about pilots. These could be pilots, engineers, cabin staff, ground crew. It's a very large company. They would all go. They would also get some additional payments, perhaps based on how long they've served in the company. But to quote Ronojoy Datta, CEO of IndiGo, from where things stand currently, it is impossible for our company to fly through this economic storm without making some sacrifices. So this is a very sad news as far as civil aviation in this country is concerned. One only wonders about the status of some of these smaller airlines and the fact that they have never had the cash reserves that IndiGo did.